Hello and welcome to today's webinar, which is hosted by the Coalition for Reimagined Mobility, or ReMo for short, an initiative of the nonprofit organization SAFE that's dedicated to shaping a more connected, sustainable, secure and efficient future for transportation. ReMo is co-hosting this webinar with PAVE Europe. Now, ReMo is focused on how new mobility technologies and services can transform the way we move people and goods, proposing a comprehensive vision for global transportation and technology policy. And for more information, you can check us out at reimaginedmobility.org. My name is Kim Watts, and I'm the Program Manager for Passenger Transportation here at ReMo. And our co-host PAVE Europe is a nonprofit coalition that seeks to raise the level of public knowledge of automated vehicle technology and its potential benefits for safety, mobility, equity, and congestion. Now, today's panel session is about an innovative approach to policy design that's gaining traction worldwide, regulatory sandboxing. Now, what is that? Well, regulatory sandboxing is a dynamic approach to creating regulation. It's designed to pilot and evaluate new mobility innovations in real-world settings under a controlled regulatory environment. And using this approach helps us to better understand all of the opportunities and risks associated with emerging technologies and develop appropriate regulatory responses. And through sandboxes and experimental legislation, we can gather all the data and evidence that's essential for informed policy development, ensuring innovations like shared autonomous vehicle shuttles or urban air mobility solutions are tested and integrated safely and effectively into the real world. And the goal of this approach is to create a dynamic, evidence-based regulatory environment that fosters innovation while prioritizing public safety and well-being. Now, today we are joined by an absolutely fantastic panel of experts on regulatory sandboxing and experimental approaches to regulation for CCAM, each bringing a wealth of real-life knowledge and experience from around the world. And I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves briefly. So, Pedro, let me hand it over to you first.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pedro Manzano. I work for Jacobs as Associate Director of Strategic Consulting in Abu Dhabi. I have recently worked in a series of technology-related projects, and currently I'm working on developing the autonomous transport regulatory framework for Abu Dhabi Emirate. Thank you.
Benno. Okay, as Pedro, I'm going to turn now to you, Benno.
Yeah, hello, everybody. My name is Benno Nager. I'm from Switzerland. I'm the national coordinator for trials in Switzerland. My background is lawyer and also project manager. And this helps me to do my job in the field of regulation, of handling trials, and that's as a part of the sandboxing or agile lawmaking we try to do in Switzerland.
Thanks so much, Benno. And as a lawyer myself, I always love having lawyers on any panels that we do. So you're very welcome. And last but certainly not least, I'd love to welcome Niels. Could you please give yourself an introduction?
Yeah. So thanks, Niels. I'm a program director for the Center of Excellence for Testing and Research of Autonomous Vehicles at NTU. So we're based in Singapore. And we work with the Singapore Land Transport Authority to effectively allow trials under a regulatory sandbox on public roads. We started off in 2017 with AVs, and later we extended it to AMRs, and I hope to bring in some of my experiences.
Really, really great, diverse range of experience here. And at the end of our discussion, Guido De Pascale, the Managing Director of PAVE Europe, is going to do a quick fire recap of the key takeaways of our sessions. And we do, some of you have seen advertised, we did have two other speakers scheduled for today, Asma Al-Nabuda from the UAE's Regulations Lab and Natalie Trier of EasyMail. Unfortunately, they became unavailable due to illness and some urgent matters. We certainly miss them, but we have a cracker panel here and lots to get through. Okay, so let's just jump straight into it. Benno, I'm going to turn to you first. Switzerland has a reputation for a really proactive approach to innovation. How does the concept of regulatory sandboxing fit into the country's legal framework concerning advanced mobility technologies?
Well, that's Actually, it's something new. We do lawmaking usually like form follows function. It's reactive. Sandboxing and agile lawmaking is something new. Because of course we don't know what to have to handle and to rule precisely. Therefore, we do that way. We go on the basis what's going in UNEC in Geneva. We see what the other ones do, what is in the European Union, and we try to make our national package, which is possible now to do it because these mobility will be first only in Switzerland. So we don't have to take care to be connected at the border. You know, later on when European Union is developed, we will go on in the same stream. But at the moment, we do that.
Agile approach, like looking outside as to what's happening in other places, but obviously then developing your own approach. And then of course, this kind of iterative approach is not normally the way that laws and regulatory frameworks are made.
Right.
That's really interesting. Niels, I'm going to direct the next question to you. Now, like Switzerland, Singapore is known for its proactive and forward-looking regulation of innovation. And there's a really strong focus on achieving socially and economically beneficial outcomes from new technologies. How has regulatory sandboxing been deployed by Singapore's Land Transport Authority in partnership with your centre?
Yeah, so as you know, Singapore is very strict when it comes to automotive regulation. We have a tight control on the vehicle population. There are very strict controls on bringing in vehicles as a part of keeping the vehicle population under control. So how do you do trials of autonomous vehicle technology? And we do the autonomous vehicle technology trials because of effectively manpower shortages, and we need to automate more services just due to manpower shortages. We started in 2016 looking at how to test autonomous vehicles and how to allow trials. And in 2017, it was announced that we were going to use a sandbox approach for 5 years. So the law says effectively single line. LTA is allowed to allow trials of autonomous vehicles on public roads for a period of 5 years till 2022. 2022 has passed. The sandbox got extended to 2027. And what do we do in the sandbox? We do the trials in quite strict because the general public has a very high expectation that the Land Transport Authority will ensure that these trials are done safe. The expectation of the public is very high, and we need to be safe. And therefore, we have quite a strict. It's not quite a strict, but there is what we call a milestone framework where we allow the trials to be done. We start at milestone 1, relatively simple, a very high reliance on safety drivers. But if you are there, you have a limited operational area where you can operate. You go to a milestone 2, you do additional tests, and you can go to a much wider area. And milestone 3, you can take out your safety drivers. All are still trials. So we have done about 40 vehicles plus for the milestone 1. We got done only about 5 for milestone 2, and none of them on milestone 3 yet, because effectively the jumps in technology are very high. One of the big challenges we have is that a lot of the technology developers don't understand the regulatory sandbox. They believe that the regulatory sandbox requirements, where we still learn how to regulate this technology, are actually going to be the final commercial one, which is not the case. We're still learning. We're not there yet to get to the final regulations. And one thing is with the regulatory sandbox, we're learning all the time. It is, if you're looking at how we do a test now and how we did a test in 2017, it's like day and night difference. And we've learned a lot of things. We learned that we were that we overlooked some issues, but we also learned that we in some cases were just too strict and unrealistic what the technology could do. So we really learned a lot, and I think that's a part of the regulatory sandbox. You learn how to do it, and you get towards hopefully the final regulations.
That's really, really interesting and amazing that those evolutions over time and the learning on both sides, both in terms of managing the expectations of the operators, but also the willingness to adapt. And to take that feedback into account. So, and that's quite different to how regulation is normally made, as Ben had pointed out. Okay, let's head over to the United Arab Emirates now. Pedro, the UAE is known for its futuristic projects in mobility and infrastructure. And in fact, the UAE at the federal level, I know, has a law on futuristic projects, which I just think is a fabulous name. How does regulatory sandboxing, and in particular the regulations lab at the federal level, facilitate these ambitious projects, particularly those involving international partnerships?
Right. So the regulatory or regulation lab in the UAE was conceived with the mission to develop new legislation that contribute to designing, adopting flexible legislative systems that keep pace with the requirements of sustainability, which is a key one for the UAE, and also aligning the speed of the regulations with the speed of the innovation in the technology. So how they do it is by setting up regulatory sandboxes to test these emerging technologies. And they don't only look at the mobility, they also launched recently some experimental legislative environments for the ICT sector and also for the fintech sector as well, which they are happening at the moment. And this allowed this company or these startups to provide or to test solution without being subject to the full suite of regulatory requirements that normally would apply to these traditional financial services firms. So the Reg Lab facilitates the setup of this through a very simple process. So the process that they have at the moment is based on 4 stages. Any company or startup that would like to for them to study a sandbox, so this is prepared for themselves. So this is not that they do have it; it's depending on the request that they may receive. They start with an application on their website. That is followed up by workshops with the government entities and the private sectors that are going to be involved in the experimentation. After that, the UAE cabinet issue a license to start the experimentation. And once the project progresses and by the finalization, they do an impasse assessment on the experimentation to recommend the required regulation or legislation that is going to be governing that technology. At the moment, in some of the sandboxes related to mobility, one of them includes a temporary license to UPS, the American multinational shipping company, to test electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. So this license is aimed at reducing the carbon emission by adopting cleaner energy in the logistics sector. So they're going to be able to start utilizing this cargo in the UAE. And the idea is that as the project moves forward, this will help to develop the necessary legislation to provide a safe operating environment for this type of aircraft, but also it's going to be helping to understand the issue of how it's going to be the regulation concerning the licensing the runways for electric aircraft, as well as regulations related to the airworthiness and operations. As at the moment, the General Civil Aviation Authority in the UAE is currently working on similar activities related to passenger transport.
That's really interesting, and an amazing framework and a clear pipeline there, giving a lot of certainty to companies about what the process might be. So I'm going to stay with you, Pedro, for the next question. Now, you in your work that you do with Jacobs, as you're involved with the development of a regulatory framework for autonomous vehicle transportation for the Emirate of Abu Dhabi specifically. Now, how have you used regulatory sandboxing or just experimental a policy development or experimental approaches as part of this work developing the framework?
So in this case, the Reg Lab, they did issue a temporary license to test self-driving vehicles, but this barely started at the moment, so we did not really have the chance to get much of the inputs that could help us to develop our regulations. But during the last probably 3 to 4 years, ITC has reached agreement with private partners. ITC is the client, is the Integrated Transport Center, which is the equivalent of the Ministry of Transport in other countries. But in Abu Dhabi. They reached to some agreement with private partners to test their technology in certain areas of Abu Dhabi. This is restricted to certain islands in Abu Dhabi. This technology currently anyone that is in Abu Dhabi can experience it. They have robotaxis in Yas Island, Saadiyat Island. They are completely free of charge. So anyone that wishes to experience what it's like being in an autonomous vehicle can do it. They just need to download the app. For anyone that might be in Abu Dhabi, the app is taxi. It's called TXAI, and you can download it and get a ride completely free of charge on those cars or robotaxis. Initially their conception, it wasn't from a regulation point of view, it was more for a technology and business case point of view to see how this technology would fit within Abu Dhabi. However, we have learned a lot of things from these companies or startups, and one of them, the major that they have, the major concern was the lack of actual regulations to deploy this technology in Abu Dhabi. They feel they are ready and they want to deploy, but there was not this framework in which they can stick to and what is the process to deploy the technology or the robotaxis. So what we have done is we have created within our regulation a regulatory sandbox-like. And what we're doing is through a trialing process. So this is described with the Abu Dhabi Connecting Autonomous Vehicles Trial Guidelines. And it's based on 4 stages. One is vehicle inspection, in which this includes the submission and review of the trial documentation that provide a comprehensive understanding of the trialing organization, the vehicle, and the trial scope. Includes the second one, it could be a controlled test track. So this is testing the vehicles within a control facility. That can be by itself or with other vehicles. The third one, it could be a simulated environment assessment. So this is a computer-based traffic simulation that ensures that a virtual validation of the performance of the vehicle. And the final one, it could be the live traffic testing. So this could be going out to test on the real world of the roads of Abu Dhabi. So this is what we've done at the moment, and the idea is that from here, now we require that the trialing organization are going to be providing end of trial reports to the ITC with the research outcomes. These are going to be obviously high-level summaries that is not going to include any commercial sensitive information, but we're interested on what has worked well on the trial, what are the challenges that they've been facing, and what was learned from the trial for the technology as well. And similarly as well, we do the same as well for those trial organizations that they're going to be trialing, especially the ones for public transport vehicles. It's a slightly different because we are more interested as well on the operational performance, safety performance, customer satisfaction. And one of the final ones that I will finish is we're very interested as well onto the cybersecurity. This is something that we really want them to be reporting on. So they have to specifically be reporting on any incidents or vulnerability or threats that they may be facing during the trials of their operations.
Really great. That's a fantastic overview. And I think also they're looking at that cybersecurity element, that's taking a slightly broader approach there, incorporating that. That's something that regulators across the world are concerned about. So fantastic to see across 3 very different jurisdictions, different parts of the world, common approaches using sandboxing, regulatory innovation, experimentation to try and how can we support innovation, let it flourish in a way that is ensures safety for the public. Now, I've got a few questions that I would actually like to ask all of you. When I was devising them, I thought, I'd actually love to know what each of you thinks about these. So the first one is, how do each of your regulatory sandboxing or experimental regulatory frameworks handle safety, privacy, and ethical considerations? These very human things that are often at the top of our mind when we think of the deployment of mobility technologies. So Benno, I'm going to first turn to you on that question.
Yeah, well, it's important that what we do here, what is be done outside for us in Switzerland and all over, it's quite the same. We cook also with water like the other ones do it,
Yes.
and what we need is in that field is we need the acceptance of what we do in the population. So this is accepted when the rules of our society, with the Swiss society, are followed. So it has to be legally okay. It has to be safe. It's, of course, the risks have to be find out, and there's a tuning of that trial in the end. So it's all about risk management, because one trial starting here in the middle of Zurich, let's say, is not the same as you do it up in the mountains. Yeah, of course. And the people are different. The people, the traffic situation is different. So it's all about that. And as we follow the thinkings of our society, and I'm part of it, of course, we just follow the rules of our society in safety, in ethics, and in security. And at the moment, the trials are quite simple, still simple. Cybersecurity is not a big aspect, but we know it will grow. It will be more important when it's fully connected. Then we will need new problems. So we have to go. Also, our part, the authority part, has to learn with every trial or every trial new situation what's going on. We are in a learning progress as the other ones outside doing these trials. Yeah.
That's great. Really like bringing into what this means for each society and like what the rules are, the meaning for each society. That's great. All right, I'm going to turn to the same question, Niels. I'm going to turn to you now on this one. How are your sandboxing there in Singapore? How these safety, privacy, and ethical considerations? How is it handled there?
Oh, it's quite strictly handled. So let's go to privacy first and privacy first. Within the Singapore government has very strict rules on data handling, but on the other hand, we have the inherited from the British the Official Secrets Act, which manages the effectively the protection of the data that is gathered by the government for certain purposes. That means that has both pros and cons. So for myself, the Land Transport Authority has access to a lot of information, but it's strictly governed by the Official Secrets Act. So they cannot share the data with me to analyze, which is sometimes a bit of a problem. To do the test, we have a second problem, is that I'm working within the university, and the university also has some projects, both with companies as well as for itself internally, on autonomous vehicle technology. So in the beginning, there was a huge concern that, hey, how do you have your privacy, your data protection in place? Because on one hand, you do testing of my vehicle, but you also, you develop the technology. How do you do that? It took us a lot of time, a couple of years, to get really the trust of everybody that we handle the data carefully. We still manage it carefully, and we have NDAs in place with all the developers before we work with them to make sure that the data is protected. And we have had no incidents on that one. The second one is safety, and safety is really has always been the top priority. And that's the reason why we have done that, because safety is critical, and the public has a very high expectation on safety. When we work with Land Transport Authority, we assess a vehicle and we do a technical assessment to say, would it be allowed the trial or would you allow an extension of the trial? We don't have a typical testing house pass and fail report. We have a report with observations. And one of the things we do that is we don't have a black and white pass or fail criteria, which actually frustrates a lot of people who say, can you tell us pass or fail, and say, it depends. It depends also because every time we see new technologies, new features, new items, things which are done differently, and sometimes we see something which is done differently, and hey, that's good, that's something we actually want. We wouldn't mind if other people would copy it, but sometimes we see things which are differently, and we go like, okay, that's a no-go for all kinds of reasons. It can be the way some software is implemented. It can be safety operator, and that's why we don't have when we do the safety assessment, we never have a black or white pass or fail of a test, because we always observe different items which are different from between vehicle to vehicle, solution to solution. And that's also part of the learning process, because no two technologies are exactly the same, and we're still learning from that. So that's something we do with safety. We take the safety very serious, and that's why we don't have a simple pass-fail.
No, it's certainly not. No, it's not straightforward, but there's learning through doing. Absolutely, you see there. Now, Pedro, I'll turn to you on the safety, privacy, and ethical considerations. How are these being handled in the framework that you're developing for Abu Dhabi?
So in terms of the safety, this is number one priority, obviously. And we have some strict activities that need to be taking place before they can trial the vehicles. That includes risk assessment and safety management plans that will be outlining all the relevant key safety risks for the trials, and they need to explain how they're going to be mitigated or eliminated. This includes security of the autonomous system, which shall make consideration for minimizing cybersecurity threats, as we mentioned before. In terms of the privacy, we have quite strict regulations in terms of personal data protection. So all the trialing organization need to consider the limitations on that data. Obviously, we expect that at the trial stage, that couldn't be a big issue. But when and we considering that some of these trials, they could be commercial point of view, so that way get a bit more tricky, because you're going to have maybe public people entering into the vehicle, so that get a bit more tricky, a bit more strict. And then on the ethical one, that's a very interesting one. We have a lot of debates on this one, and I think this is something that kind of all the countries, they're looking at each other to see what they're going to do, because this needs to be harmonized. And our approach on this sense, when I'm talking about ethical, I'm considering like what the technology is going to do when it gets into a point they need to decide against what is going to crash. So our approach it's quite in line with the Germans' approach, which we expect that the car, it should always attempt to minimize human death and shouldn't discriminate between individuals based on age, gender, or any other factor. And also, obviously, that's the human life is above anything else, is priority over animals or properties. And we believe that this is something that need to be embedded within the technology.
So there's really all fascinating answers there. And I think on that ethics point, as we see, and then thinking of that needs to be harmonized, but also there's very specific local elements, as Benno pointed to, with specific, established views, Switzerland, with the way of life and the way the rules are developed, or in Singapore, some expectations around, if something is gained approval from a public authority, very high expectations. So there's need for harmonization, but also the local human element and what we expect in our society is okay. Okay, now my next question for all of you, some of you touched on it already in some of your answers. Something we've identified here at ReMo is the need for having feedback and learning to get from the experiments, from the trials that are approved in the sandbox, for the learnings from those to be rapidly integrated into national regulations or policies. So the knowledge capture here. And I know in terms of some of the frameworks that you've described here, that does seem to be a part of it, impact assessments. But what I'd really like to ask each of you, do you take a compulsory or flexible approach to this? So by compulsory, it's that the knowledge the learnings have to be captured in a specific way and incorporated into a specific way in the regulatory formation, or a slightly more flexible approach. So on this question, I'll turn first to you, Benno.
Yeah, okay. We go the flexible way, because every trial is different. So as from our view, we have a special eye on that new trial. We don't want to have repeated trials. That's not funny. We want to have, every trial has to be something different, even something more. So the reporting out of the trial and the findings have to be just add on to what we had before. And it's all about transparency. We want to have this information. They have to report It's completely different as in US, where there's no reporting. We learn a lot about that, but they have to inform us immediately when something is wrong. It has to be reported, and what we do is we give this information to the broader public on our website, and that's the information. It's not private information about the secret of the business of that trial or that company, of course not, but what the learnings are. That's one big aspect of going forward, and learning more of different technologies in that field. Well, new sensors, new generation of cameras or whatever, and a new trial is in front of you. And making this available is one thing. The other thing is to learn a lot from the other ones within Europe. What do the other ones, what is going on in Asia? Is it comparable to us? And that is very important for us, because we're not the ones who know how to rule it in the end. That's why we do that agile lawmaking, that sandboxing. And the other one can be better, and we try to, when we have a new trial or whatever, to go to include this, where in the knowledge we start from that. Yeah. So it's about that.
From your own trials, but also from other locations as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so Niels, I'll turn to you next. So we've heard flexible is the way to go from the Swiss perspective. How about in Singapore from the knowledge capture? A very structured approach or something a bit more flexible?
It's flexible. The way we capture the information is flexible, but directly the information which is captured from trials is not made public. So that is kept confidential. It's not, so that you can't go anywhere on a website to look at information on the trials. We do share, we do consolidate some of the lessons learned in our technical reference. And in Singapore, a technical reference is effectively a predecessor of a standard which is used for new technologies where the content is not mature enough yet to be a real standard. So a technical reference, the requirement of a technical reference is you need to update it every 2 to 3 years. And if you have nothing to update, then it's either, is it mature enough to become a standard, or if it's not mature enough, drop it. It's not going to go anywhere. So we have a technical reference for the autonomous vehicle standard, and that's where we capture a lot of these lessons learned and where it actually gets distributed.
Hybrid element, there's clear formats for how data is to be captured, but ultimately flexible in the way that learning is applied. Okay, Pedro, I'll turn the question to you. Same one, knowledge capture in sandboxing and experimental regulation, and some of those impact reports that you mentioned, in terms of how that's feeding into the development of the regulation, sort of a more structured approach or a flexible approach.
So we want to make it easy. So we are flexible in terms of how we receive that information. What we are not flexible are the aspects of what information we're going to be receiving. Safety and privacy are non-negotiable. So that information is a must. We are not flexible on that one. We are flexible on other kind of information, as it might be related to a technology, standards, or the approach from a technological point of view. On that one, we are not that strict, but when we're talking about safety and privacy, that's a must that we need to receive, because it's our priority number one. That we want to have regulations that's safety for the public and security is it needs to be our top priority.
What is captured, but then in terms of how that feeds into the regulatory development, no prescriptive processes about how that is done. Okay, and then the next question I have for all of you, advanced mobility solutions are global in nature. It's global firms developing these solutions and services, international collaboration and research. And so how can we better enhance international cooperation in regulatory sandboxing and regulatory innovation? I'd like to think that this webinar is an example of it, bringing all you experts here together to share your insights with a global audience. But how can we better enhance that cooperation? We heard from Benno that you're learning when you're taking the knowledge capture. It's not just looking at what's happened in Switzerland, you're looking at in other places. So I'll turn to you first then, Benno, on that. How can we enhance international cooperation on regulatory sandboxing best practices?
I think when we follow the way we just on it and we do it even better, then it's changing best practices. What we do is we look at the neighbors, what's going on in France. We hear it up at the media. We have our network. We go there and ask our colleagues what is really, because we are always in the marketing trap of the company. So what you see on the very nice sheet is not the reality, of course. And we want to know the reality and what it's worth of this technology. And we have these contacts all over Europe. We have this network, and we do exchange what's running well, where we have difficulties, and that makes a lot of sense to do it all over the world, of course. So I have also contacts to US, to California, and I ask them what's going on with the trials. How do you handle that? Because we are in front of fog or a wall, let's say, and we have to get over it or through it. And if someone has passed that, it's very nice to have this experience. And I can say that everyone is helping each other with his experiences, and this makes it very, very thrilling also to work in that field, because usually working for government is not that thrilling, but this is very.
Oh dear. The answer to your question got cut off there. I was getting a little bit worried about you expressing your views on working for the government. But absolutely, the sharing of information and this collaboration. I mean, the connected cooperative and autonomous vehicle community is one that's so willing to share its insights and learnings, about its processes. So the real human element there, I think, is what you've identified. Niels, I'll turn to you on that. Yes, sorry, you wanted to finish something.
If I can add something, which is very important, is to being part of the work which is going on UNECE in Geneva, of course. It's starting there. And of course, Switzerland is part of Europe. So traffic is not Swiss, it's inter-European traffic. So we have to handle what's going on with our neighbors, of course. And this is very important. Yeah?
Of course.
Asia is also important as well, from the technical development or US, but what's the traffic itself is European, so that's our planet where we have to do the job.
That's great. Okay, Niels, I'll turn to you now then. So enhancing international cooperation in sandboxing innovation. You're doing the same thing, reaching out to people just as Benno is.
No, I'm going to give you an example where we got caught off guard due to the lack of collaboration. One thing that happened during COVID is since 2020 to late 2022, early 2023, all the borders went up globally. I didn't travel for a long time to meet anybody else internationally. What we saw is sometime in this year we saw some Chinese solutions brought into Singapore for trials, and I knew that a lot was going on in China. I went myself again to China in July, and I was quite amazed about the progress they made in terms of the scale of the trials in 2021, 2020, 2021, 2022. And we were not aware. So we are now exactly struggling is how do we handle these kind of solutions bringing to Singapore, because we have a framework which assumes that you come in at a certain level of maturity, but these solutions come in at a different level of maturity because they've gone to extensive trials in China. And that is something we are now catching up and see how we can handle it. So yes, the collaboration is important because in the end, nobody can redo qualification of the solutions from scratch for every single area. You need to be able to reuse what has been done in other countries to go faster.
That's that's great. The importance of being blindsided, if we don't stay connected and aware of what developments are happening. Pedro, I'll turn to you now for the same question. How can we enhance international cooperation in sandboxing and innovation?
I think one of the very important things is they mentioned before, knowledge sharing and collaboration. And I think this is a really important one. It could be made in different ways, such as international regulatory forums, this kind of conferences that we're having now. Something that Abu Dhabi is going to be looking at is on to join sandbox initiatives, whether they are with another Emirates or they are with neighbor countries. And also data sharing and joint research, because that is going to make it more efficient and effective. But I think that's something that is very important, is about harmonizing standards. So we need to look at end up with having some global regulatory standards that then later is going to be adapted to each of the characteristics of the countries. So that's something that is going to be fundamental, I think, in the future.
Yeah. That's great. So the ongoing need for collaboration is absolutely clear, and there's many ways for us to be doing that. And hopefully this session is one example, one little piece of doing that. So I'm just going to skip ahead a question just to make sure I've seen there's some questions popping up in the chat. So I'm going to skip ahead, and I'm going to ask each of you. You shared such amazing insights today. But I'd love to ask each of you, what would you say is the one most important factor to a successful regulatory sandboxing and knowledge capture framework for advanced mobility technologies? So if someone knocked on your door and said, what's the one most important factor you need to keep in mind? Benno, I'll turn to you first on that.
Well, it's just one. It's a lot of aspects, but it's trust, it's transparency, it's good risk management, and it's exchanging experiences. And as the future will be in mobility for decades now, this has to be redeveloped and going on. And it depends on if you say it depends on the people who do it. So you need the support of your government, and if you have that support, they push you forward, then it's working. If it's like COVID was, everything was blocked, this happens. So it was a real interruption in our sandboxing world in Switzerland. But it's about new things, I guess, and we will have to do it again and again and again and again and again.
So one thing is those the three T's, well, the multiple T's, the trust and the transparency. That's a great one. Okay, Niels, your one trick for doing regulatory sandboxing well. What would you say to that?
You need to keep in mind there is a lot of players involved in a sandbox, and all these players need to work together well and be pragmatic, because you're going to run into it's new technology. You're going to not only run into new technology and changes. You in some cases go to radically new solutions which you might not have even foreseen in the beginning, and you need to be very pragmatic and agile to handle that. And everybody needs to be aware of that all the time.
That's great. Yeah, being aware that it's not just and that's, I think, to the point that has been raised multiple times already in this session, that it's not the standard way we've done regulation before, or a top-down approach. You're involving a lot of different parties with a lot of different objectives and motivations. So harnessing all of that, herding the cats, so to speak, doing it well is very important. Okay, Pedro, I'll turn to you with the same question. The one thing you'd say about what's your one key takeaway for doing regulatory sandboxing well?
Very close to what Neil said. To me, is collaboration, collaboration, and collaboration. So there's a lot of stakeholders involved. So the collaboration between the different stakeholders that include regulators, industry players, academia, other stakeholders. For example, in here we may have the police, we may have civil defense. That is really important, that they are in communication and they are working together toward the same goal.
Okay. I love it. Okay, so now we've got time for a little bit of Q&A. We've had some questions submitted to us in advance, and also some questions in the chat. I'm going to tackle the ones, some of the ones I've got here. Who sets the success criteria for a sandbox? And are these criteria both quantitative, numbers-based, and qualitative, so descriptive-based? So just if a short answer from each of you on that one. How do we set those metrics for success in sandboxing? Benno?
Well, I'm a lawyer. I had difficulties with matrix and so on. You can't say it. It has to be a good mix, in my view. You need both. You need both, and it depends on the state where you are. We are still at the moment of that new mobility, and maybe in 5 years' time, it's more precise. We learn about more aspects which are needed for these areas where these vehicles or these new mobility forms are in place, and then it changes immediately. But at the moment, it's quite an open way to go to that topic.
Yeah. So a mix. And as a
I'm
lawyer,
wondering what's the other guy say. Yeah.
Mix, exactly. So what, I have to say I'm a little bit with you, Benno, being a lawyer, I do see a bit of a mix on it, but others may disagree. So Niels, what would you say? How do you set the metrics for success in sandboxing?
We don't have many metrics at all. It's the same. We're trying new technology. Thing. The only thing we did have to put in place is we put in some service quality requirements to get responses to technology developers back, and that was needed because sometimes you come across a technology which is new and if you can go off the track and deliberate it for eternity, and we have now service quality, we need to get back to and have a response within so much time, because you need to start taking the next step, and you can't negotiate everything till you drop dead. So that is the only kind of thing we do. We have some response times to taking, so that we don't get stuck at a certain point at the same time, but the rest we have very little metrics.
Okay, all right. That was not maybe the answer I was expecting, but a good one. Pedro, how about you? What would you say? How do you set those metrics for success?
Yeah, not going to be very different to my colleagues. There are we believe that there are very few metrics that you can set up for this. Probably some of them related to safety, response, emergency, and so on. But because this technology is evolving so fast and it's changing so much and so quickly, any metric that you may set up today in a few months, it may be completely outdated or not be measuring properly what we want to get. So yeah, I don't think that I'm a bit advocate of many metrics on this case, on this area.
Right. So fixing, very, very fixed hard KPI is not the way to go. And I think a little bit what we saw with the knowledge capture as well, that you may be structured in terms of the data that you're gathering, but flexible in terms of how you would apply them. So that's very similar there, something common. So another question that I've got here, and this relates to the impact of sandboxing on the ability of private operators who may be participating in the sandbox and being able to secure funding and scale their product. Because of course we've seen across the mobility landscape, there's been a contraction in some of the funding that may be available to private sector innovative companies. And some uncertainty about how and when they might be able to deploy their products and services. But with the certainty of sandboxing a pathway to testing and deployment, this is something positive. So what role would you say that regulatory clarity through sandboxing plays in mitigating some of those investment risks associated with new mobility technologies? And I'm mindful, I know that the three of you are on the other side of it. You're looking at this from the regulator perspective, but just from what you've observed, that how does this innovative approach help the operator in your view from what you've seen? So I'm going to go again to you first, Benno, on that.
Well, in Switzerland, the mitigating the risks of these operators of these trials, it's not the job of the government. Yeah, it's enabling to help them to try that new technology on the road. And the risks for these companies are very high. We see it all over the world. The investments are big, and companies come and go and come and go. But generally, our role is to enable it, to help them, and to bring it to the people that they can see what is of new mobility, what is on the road, what is available. Of course, usually this technology we see in Switzerland, this prototypes. So it's far away from operational stuff everyone would use. I would never use it because it's not good enough to bring the mobility to me. But in the future it will. So for these companies, it's hard work, and a lot of money and a lot of pain.
Yeah, but I like the takeaway there of bringing it to the people. I like that, supporting these companies to bring their innovations to the people. I like that. Niels, your thoughts on this?
I'm going to be a bit controversial because I get a lot of complaints from technology developers. They always think that we are stopping them. We don't. We enable them. We help them to de-risk and get a solution out, because without all the work done in the sandbox, there is no regulation to let you deploy commercially. It's people think, well, let me do a thing and deploy. Yes, but you're not doing a computer. So you do not do a game on a computer. You're doing a real life vehicle which goes at high speed through traffic and has human beings on board. You can never do something safe. It's same as medical technology. It's the same as fintech. It can't go wrong. And sometimes there is a lack of appreciation among the technology developers of this fact that we are helping them to get the regulations developed which allows them to go fully commercial. And that takes time because you are in a strictly regulated environment. And if they knew how much goes into an approval just of an ordinary vehicle, and how much regulations have gone in there, and how many standards till you got there, and how much time it takes to certify one, they might talk a bit differently. But I find a lot of people just don't seem to understand that we are there to help them de-risk their technology and get the regulations developed to allow commercially to be deployed.
I'm going to take the positive spin on that and say, I'm here to be your friend is really the takeaway, there on that one.
We are. We are.
Exactly. Pedro, your thoughts on this, on how having the clear pathway to be able to experiment, use regulatory sandboxing, how can this support mobility businesses that we know it's a tough environment for them? How can it, is it something that helps?
Definitely, it does help, and the technology developers, they need to understand that without the regulatory sandboxing, their work, it could be a lot more costly and expensive. These sandboxings bring the cost of innovation down, that's proof, reduce the barriers and allow the regulators to collect information for them, really good to understand whether further regulation is required, but also at the same time, it helps the innovator to understand whether the innovation that they have or the technology that they're providing, it's good to continue investing on it, or actually they need to go back and rethink on what they're doing. So actually this can be saving them a lot of money in the long term in order to innovate and to come up with a really good solutions, in this case for the autonomous vehicles. So
I like being able to say the takeaway from that being that regulatory sandboxing saves you money or lowers the cost of innovation. That's a good one as well. Yep. Now this has been really great. So I'm just going to eye the time here, and I want to turn things over to Guido. I'm going to come to you now because this has been such a fantastic discussion. I love this. This is like a form of live research and insights gathering with our panelists who have given some really fantastic, effective and concrete examples of how to regulate useful, positive new mobility technologies. And, I've just been sort of immersed listening to all of this, but I wonder, what would you say are your key takeaways from today's discussion?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Kim, and thank you to all the panelists, because the discussion was great, and I hope that the audience also appreciated it. I think it matches perfectly with the first virtual panel that we organized on regulatory frameworks.
Exactly. Yes.
And with this one, we completed, let's say, our journey through the regulatory approaches, and we had also a very good overview in different regions of the world. But it seems there is convergence, and it seems there is an agreement that sandboxing is an enabler for innovation, as it was mentioned just now at the end. So to enabling not only the learnings from the local authorities, from the governments on how to regulate and keep pace with the technology, because the technology is advancing very fast. and it's difficult to adapt the regulation, but also to help the industries and these companies that are investing money on this technology to learn and understand how to deploy and how to continue their investments. So there were many discussions, and I tried to just to highlight some keywords or some takeaways. The importance of trials, of course, it is very important. So important also to be agile and be flexible. So all our experts here highlighted the agility that these trials and these tools can give to the deployment of the technology. But also, if we look at the different aspects like privacy, safety, ethical aspects, there are sometimes some conflicts, because if you look at privacy, you need to take care of data, personal data, but at the same time you need data to conduct these trials. So there is a need there to look at it carefully. Safety first. So it came out the first virtual panel that we had, and it came here again. So safety, it is important, and it was highlighted that these trials with regulatory sandboxing are also a way to manage the risks, or to mitigate the risks for the government. So this is very important. And also the knowledge capture, of course, this allows to learn a lot from the regulator side, but also from the industry side. But also international cooperation is very important. So to look at what is happening outside, collaborate with other regions of the world, with the UNICE, with the European Commission, of course, because we are not isolated. And also it was mentioned the need for a global harmonization of regulation that then needs to be adopted and adapted by the local governments. So that's
a roundup. There's a lot, because we covered a lot, I know. So that's a really super roundup. Well done, Guido. I feel you did a better job than I did when it was my turn doing the roundup. And I guess the one that I struck by everyone's answers was really the human element of collaboration, the human element of what we're doing this for. And I really like that as well. So great insights, and we'll be sending a follow-up email to everyone or to our whole audience with some of those key takeaways of this great discussion. Thank you so much, Guido, for that. Now, unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. I'd like to extend a virtual round of applause to our panelists. And to Guido, thank you for sharing your insights and expertise with us today. It's very appreciated. I found it absolutely fascinating, and I know our audience will have as well. Thank you so much to your audience for joining us and participating in this fantastic discussion. Thank you for submitting your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get through all of them. And now, wherever you are in the world, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday period. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right.